The first signs of trouble in Hawkins showed up quietly, the way storms sometimes start with a single gust. It began in the woods behind Hopper's rebuilt cabin. The air felt heavier at night, almost charged, and animals avoided the area. Hopper noticed it first. He had gone out early in the morning to chop wood and saw frost collecting in strange circular patterns on the ground. It was midsummer. The trees around him seemed to lean toward the cabin, as if pushed by an invisible current. He kept it to himself for a day, thinking it might be nothing. But nothing in Hawkins stayed ordinary for long. 11 sensed the tension in him. She had been rebuilding her strength slowly. Her powers were not what they used to be, and using them still felt like lifting something far heavier than she could handle. Even so, she tried to stretch her limits. She lifted small objects, listened for faint echoes, tried to reach familiar voices from far edges of memory. Most attempts left her tired. Hopper told her to rest more often than she liked. That evening, they had dinner together. Hopper made his usual attempt at scrambled eggs that were closer to rubber than food, and 11 pushed them around her plate. The quiet between them was almost comfortable, except for the way her eyes kept drifting toward the window. She felt something out there. She just did not know how to explain it yet. Mike arrived the next day. He had taken a bus out to Hawkins earlier than planned. The first thing he did was hug 11, and the second was ask why she looked like she had not slept well. 11 told him she had been having strange dreams. They were not memories and not visions, but something between the two. She kept seeing a red glow pulsing in the dark, like a heartbeat, and a shadow stretching toward her. Every time she reached out to push it away, she woke up with a sharp pain behind her eyes. Mike tried to reassure her, but she could tell he was worried. He tried calling the others later though. The group stayed at Hopper's cabin for hours, trying to make sense of everything. Papers covered the table. Drawings from Will, Nancy's notes, Dustin's rough measurements, and 11 scattered memories of her dreams all pointed to one thing. Something was coming from below the upside down, and it was pushing hard. Hopper kept pacing near the windows. He checked the woods every few minutes as if expecting something to walk out of the trees. Joyce stayed close to Will, who looked pale and restless. His connection to the upside down had faded over the years, but now it seemed to be pulling on him again, like a hook buried somewhere deep inside him. Nancy studied one of Will's drawings more closely. The red crack in the drawing wasn't a simple line. When she looked long enough, she noticed thin branching paths running from it, almost like roots. Each root pointed toward a different area of Hawkins. One angled toward the quarry. Another toward the old mall site. Another toward the school. Dustin leaned over her shoulder and traced the lines with his finger. He said it looked like the thing underground was searching for weak points to break through. Jonathan asked Will if he had drawn these from a vision or if something had guided him. Will hesitated. He said it didn't feel like before, when the mind flayer controlled him. This time he felt like someone was showing him pieces of something it wanted him to see. Not to control him, but to warn him. He didn't know why. 11 listened carefully. She asked Will if the presence felt familiar. He shook his head. It felt like a void, he said. Like something that existed long before the upside down even took shape. Hopper decided they needed to split up and investigate the locations closest to the red lines in Will's drawings. Nobody liked the idea of splitting up, but they didn't have time to argue. If something was cracking through, they needed to find it before it spread across the whole town. Dustin, Lucas, and Max too. The storm over Hawkins didn't come with rain. The sky darkened, but the clouds held still. The town felt hollow, like something had sucked the warmth out of the air. By the time everyone regrouped at Hopper's cabin, the ground vibrations had grown steadier. Not violent, but constant, like the world beneath them had begun to breathe. Dustin spread out the updated drawings and the new readings he took. The pulsing intervals lined up perfectly across the 3 locations they checked. That meant the cracks underground weren't random. They were synchronized. Hawkins wasn't dealing with scattered gateways. They were looking at a single source branching outward. Nancy argued they needed to go to the lab immediately. She believed the main rupture was forming there and everything else was connected to it. Hopper didn't want Eleven exposed to anything underground in her weakened state. Eleven insisted she was coming. She said whatever was rising was pulling at her, and she might be the only one who could sense its rhythm. Will kept quiet through most of the planning. He sat by the window, staring out at the trees. He didn't look scared, just thoughtful, like he was listening to something far away. Joyce noticed and sat beside him. When she asked what he felt, he told her the presence wasn't hiding anymore. It was paying attention to them the same way someone watches a crack in a wall spread. Curious. Calm. Cold. The group set out in 2 cars, with lights off until they hit the main road. Dustin, Lucas, and Max piled into Hopper's truck. Jonathan drove the others in Joyce's car. The woods looked darker than they should have. Even the stars felt dimmer. When they reached the site of the old lab, the air carried that same metallic smell again. Hopper signaled everyone to stay quiet. The fence barely stood anymore, so they slipped through easily. The ruins looked different this time. Frost marked the ground in thicker patches. The concrete slab seemed to pulse with faint re. The night over Hawkins held a strange stillness. Not quiet, but expectant. The air felt tight and thin, the way it does before an earthquake. The group met again at Hopper's cabin, knowing it was their last chance to stop whatever was crawling up from beneath the upside down. They spread out their notes, measurements, and sketches, but none of it offered a clear path. Hopper stood at the center of the room with his arms crossed. He had faced demogorgons, shadow monsters, government labs, and nearly lost 11 more times than he could count, but this was different. He felt it in the air. This wasn't a creature they could chase. It wasn't a mind they could cut off. It wasn't anything they could point a gun at. It was a force older than the upside down itself. 11 sat on the couch, legs pulled to her chest. The moment she closed her eyes she saw flashes of the red world again. The shifting ground, the dark sky, the formless shape rising in the distance. It wasn't just growing. It was learning. It had been sleeping under the upside down like something buried beneath ice. Now the ice was melting. Dustin leaned over the table and proposed something risky. He said if they could map enough of the pulse timing from the cracks at the 3 locations, they might be able to predict when the main rupture would open. If they knew the timing, 11 might be able to disrupt it for a moment. Long enough for them to stop it or slow it down. Nancy listened, arms folded. She said they needed something stronger than disruption. She believed they had only one real chance. They needed to collapse whatever was left of the old lab tunnels and seal the main crack from above. Jonathan agreed but reminded her they had no weapons strong enough to collapse the deeper sections. Hopper said he knew a place where he might still find something. Joyce didn't like the sound of that. She remembered the underground Russian base and everything they found there. Hopper said the base was sealed.